talking a lot about robots, androids, and cyborgs. So at this time, I'd like to go over each of these and what the differences are. A robot is a machine capable of carrying out a complex series of actions automatically, especially one programmable by a computer. It usually does not take on a human form. An android is a robot with a human appearance. So it does everything a robot can do, but also it has a human appearance. A cyborg, which is short for cybernetic organism, is a being with both organic material and biomechatronic body parts. That means it's part living flesh and part machinery. In most of the definitions for a cyborg, it says that it's a human with mechanical parts, as opposed to mechanical parts with living tissue on it. In that definition, the Terminator would not be a cyborg. All right, so now that we know the difference between those three things, we are creating a cyborg. So we're starting with you, the human, and we are merging you with some mechanical parts. Let's go ahead and get into our folder. And we want to open our self-portrait that we took on Photo Booth and the image of the android that we selected. So let me show you how to select two files at once. You're going to select one and then hold Shift and click on the other one. Now they're both selected. I'm going to right click and go to Open With and go to Adobe Photoshop CC. All right, so I have both my images open and I can click back and forth from the tabs here and here. But I don't want to use these images for my project file because I want to set my project file up into a certain size. We're going to be using letter size, and so that's either 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 8.5. So you need to make a decision ahead of time whether you want this to be portrait or landscape. I found that most landscape images show more of the background, where more portraits are going to be more tight to the cyborg that you're creating. You also may want to look at what your subject is. Since in my case, I'm using this exoskeleton and I'm inside of it, my subject is on a landscape. So I'm going to go ahead and keep mine on a landscape. So you just have to look at what you're dealing with, what you want, and make a decision on that. All right, so once you've made your decision, portrait or landscape, you can go to File, New, and I want you to come up to the top here and go to Print. That's where you'll see your letter size option. All right, while you're on your letter size option, you notice you have an orientation option. So it's currently on portrait, and remember, I decided I wanted landscape, so I'm going to switch that. And then I'm going to check and make sure that my resolution is 300 pixels per inch because we want to design this for print. We want a nice, good quality, high resolution image. So I'm going to hit Create, and there is my blank canvas ready to get started. What I want to do is I want to pull in the image that's going to be the subject first. To do that, we want to hit Command A, which selects the entire image, and then Command C, which will copy the image. Now I'm going to move over to my untitled new document and hit Command V, and that will paste the image. Now I don't want any of this white stuff, so I need to do what's called a transformation. And to get into a transformation, I'm going to hit Command T, and I can grab this image now and move it wherever I want. I can come out here, and this would be tilt, but please don't tilt your image unless you need to because it's hard to get it straight again. And I can also size it. Now, one thing about sizing in Photoshop, this is really important. I do not want to distort this image because this is my main image, it's my subject, and I do not want to distort it. Therefore, I need to size it only from one of these four corners, and I have to hold Shift while I'm doing it. If I let go of the Shift key, do you see what happens? It gets either too skinny, too wide. So once I hold Shift, it does not allow me to do that. So size it only from the corners while holding Shift. Let go of the mouse first always, then the Shift key. Now you have these four other nodes, the top and the bottom nodes and the two side nodes. those will distort even if you're holding shift. So those are not good to use for sizing. So ignore those unless you are distorting on purpose. And that's rare. Okay, so it's more common to keep things in proportion than to purposely distort them. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this and move it into the corner. Since my Android is cut off on this edge and cut off on this edge, that must be on these edges. I could not have her floating up like this because that doesn't look good. So we have to take it down to this corner. And so I'm going to size it up from this corner, holding shift. I'm going to pull it up, and I can pull it up as far as I want, really. Just ignore what's going on in the background. So like ignore the white, ignore that it's going off the page there. So if I want to make this as big as I can, and not cut her off at all, I could go this high. I could even go higher, but then she's getting cut off, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to cut her off at the top. So I'll probably take her about right there. And again, ignore if you have any white showing here. That's not going to matter. But I can't have any white showing here because she's cut off there, or here because she's cut off there. Then once I get her transformed to where I want her, I'm going to click this little button up here and accept. All right, so that's exactly where I want it. Now I'm going to come over to my layer and I'm going to rename it. And we talked about how this is an Android, so I'll rename it Android. You can call it robot if you want. Okay, then I'm going to go back to my self-portrait, and I need to move this over into my file as well. So Command A to select, Command C to copy, go back to my untitled image, Command V to paste, and I'm going to double click and rename that Me. Now let's talk about the order of my layers for a second. So I have my background layer, and I'm just going to leave that right there for now. And then my next layer up is my Android, and then the image of me. This order will be reversed if you're doing an endoskeleton such as the Terminator. So if you're doing an endoskeleton such as the Terminator, your Me copy will be underneath your Android copy. Okay, because the one on top is the one we're about to distort, and the one on the bottom is the one that's our subject that we don't want to distort. So make sure your order is correct, and if you have any questions about that, raise your hand and ask me for help, because this is going to be a lot of work that we're going to do in a minute, and I don't want you doing work and then having to throw it away and start over again. So it's really important that you have your layers ordered right and that you're distorting the correct image. So remember, I'm allowed to distort my face because my face is inside of this thing and it's not the subject and it's not what's showing the most. So what I want to do first is I want to come up to, while I'm on the Me layer, I want to come up to the opacity, and I'm going to reduce the opacity so I can see both me and the Android. Okay, when I'm happy with that opacity, I'm going to do a transformation of my image. Command T, and this time I do need to tilt it because my eyes are at a different angle than her eyes. So if I move my eye up here, I do need to size it. I'm not worried about distortion anymore. I can hold shift if I want to keep my face as undistorted as possible, but at some point I'm probably going to need to do some distortion. Okay, so I'm also going to need to tilt. So I'm moving my cursor outside of the box, and when I get the curvy arrow with arrows on both ends, I can click and tilt. All right, and now I'm just going to start distorting and stretching until I get my eyes lined up with her eyes. And this takes some time and it takes patience, because you'll notice I'm getting this eye lined up right here, and then this eye is off, and so then I line up this eye, and then this eye is off. So I'm really going to be going back and forth, back and forth. I have noticed that while I'm doing this, it feels like it's snapping to the grid or snapping to something, and I want to take that off. So I'm going to go ahead and accept it where I've got it right now, go to View, and you'll notice I have a little check mark where it says Snap. I want to click on that and make sure that that's off. All right, that will help me a lot getting this exactly where I want. I'm going to zoom out a little bit too while I'm doing this, and Command T again. And the reason I zoomed out was so that I would have access to all these nodes. And you may have to do that at some point as well. All right, so just continuing. Sometimes I like to put the eyes underneath her eyes, and then that way I can see better what I'm doing, and when I get them about the same size, then I'll pull them up into her eyes. So that's an option that you have. So I'm really trying to get the round iris part of my eyes to match up with the round iris part of her eyes. And I'm not even looking at the mouth and the chin at this point, just the eyes. I'm going to work with that. And then I'll look at the mouth and chin and see if that's even going to be possible. I'm going to tilt this a little bit more. And I'm getting really close here now. I can see this. You'll also notice that I'm not paying attention to what's going on the outside. It's not relevant at this point. So I'm ignoring that. It's not going to matter. And you'll see why in a little bit. Okay, now that it's really close, I'm going to go ahead and accept it. And I will turn my opacity up and just kind of view this as I'm turning my opacity up. And as I'm doing that, I'm seeing that this eye is really good, but this one's still a little bit off. So with that opacity up a little bit, I want to pull this eye out a little bit. So now that eye looks good and this one's off. So again, I'm back to that kind of back and forth thing. I'm just going to keep doing that until it's right. Okay, right there I feel like I have it pretty good. So I'm going to keep turning that opacity up and turn it down and up so I can see both of them pretty good. Okay, so I feel like I have it pretty good on the eyes. So now I'm going to look at the mouth and chin and see if this is even doable with the mouth and chin. I think it's somewhat doable. My mouth is a little bit more over this way. And I kind of like her mouth and chin better anyway. So for me, I'm just going to go with the eyes. You guys can do what you want on that, but I'm just going to go with the eyes. So I'm going to turn my opacity all the way back up. And now it's time to save. So File. Remember, the first time you save anything, you need to do a Save As. And you need to navigate to your folder. So if you have this view, push the little arrow. Go to the desktop where you know your folder is, go into your folder, and I have a lot of subfolders, so I need to get to my Cyborg. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to do today is we're going to name this last, so your last name, then your first name, and Cyborg, and save. Please let me know if you have any questions, and we will continue on with this with our next tutorial.